I broke off the engagement for a stranger, then later on find out I was just a bet. My name is Renee Carter. I'm 27 years old, and this is the story I wish I could rewind and rewrite. I wish I could grab the girl I was by the shoulders and tell her to go home, to put her phone down, to stop before she crossed a line she said she'd never cross. I didn't stop. I kept going until the life I loved folded up like a paper cup in my hands. I met my fiancé Malik Grant when I was 23 and he was 26. We met at a bus stop in late spring on a day when the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or shine. I had a tote bag full of groceries and a broken umbrella that flipped inside out every time the wind sighed. He stepped beside me holding a big black umbrella and said, "Do you want to share?" He had soft eyes and careful hands. He angled the umbrella so I wouldn't get rained on, even though it meant his shoulder got wet. We rode the bus together for 6 stops and talked the whole way, about little things like the neighborhood bakery and the price of eggs, then about bigger things like how his mom loved old soul music and how I was taking night classes in graphic design. Malik asked if he could walk me to my building. He didn't try anything, he just asked if I liked pancakes or waffles, and when I said pancakes, he grinned like a promise. That weekend, he made me pancakes with caramelized bananas, and we listened to his mom's Al Green vinyl on a record player that had a wobbly needle. It felt like 2 people choosing the easy version of life. Small apartment, shared secrets, thrift store mugs that didn't match. Bills we paid on time by sending each other screenshots to double-check. After 2 years of dating, he gave me a ring in a park, under a maple tree that dropped little seeds at our feet. I cried so hard I couldn't even say yes at first. I just nodded and pressed my forehead to his while people clapped somewhere in the background. We were engaged for a year. We were, in almost every way, the definition of normal. We split rent. We argued about brand names versus store brands. He liked movies with car chases. I liked slow documentaries with piano music. We compromised. We went to his sister's Sunday dinners, where his nephews ran circles around the table, and to my mom's Friday fish fries, where the elders shouted at Jeopardy like the contestants could hear them. I loved him. I loved the safety of his voice and the way his hands warmed my cold fingers in winter. I loved the life we were building, a puzzle we did together, piece by piece. Malik loved me loudly. He loved me so loudly that he texted a lot, maybe 5 or 6 times a day. "You eat? You see that video of the duck walking into the store? Did you hear that song I sent? How you feelin'? How's your head after last night?" In the beginning, it felt like sunlight. Someone cared about the smallest parts of my day. Over time, it started to itch. I'd be in a meeting and my phone would buzz again. Another meme, another headline, another "you good?" I started muting the thread sometimes, then felt guilty and unmuted it. When I told him it was a bit much, he nodded, and then, the very next day, sent me a photo of a pancake shaped like a heart with the caption "Practice for Sunday." I know it sounds sweet. It was sweet. It was also a steady tap on the same part of my skull, a drip that wore down the stone. Saturday nights were for my girls. We had a group chat called Glitter Tax because we paid it every weekend. Eyelashes, nails, drinks, heels we couldn't really walk in. Sometimes we just sat in someone's living room with cheap wine and watched old music videos. Sometimes we went to a club downtown with a low ceiling and blue lights that made everyone look more beautiful, or at least mysterious. I drank a little. I danced a lot. Guys would hit on us. Most were forgettable. I wasn't cruel, but I wasn't interested. If someone wouldn't take a hint, I'd take the number and then I'd delete it before I got home. I had a fiancé I loved. I promised myself out loud to my reflection that I would never cross a line. The night I met Adrian Cole, I crossed the line from curiosity into danger without even touching him. He was with a group of guys near the bar, tall and cut like he put time into it, wearing a simple black tee that made him look like he belonged everywhere. He kept looking over. My friend Keisha elbowed me and said, "That one, he's fine. If he comes over here, I'm speaking first." I laughed and said he's okay, because I didn't want to be the girl who admitted temptation out loud. Adrian left his friends and came toward us like the scene had been rehearsed. "You ladies good?" he asked, and then he looked at me like the room blurred around us. He complimented my hair, which was in a twist out I'd finally got right, and asked if he could buy me a drink. I said no. I lifted my glass as if to prove I didn't need anything. He asked for one dance. I said no again, but my friends were already betraying me with smiles and nudges. One dance, Nee, Keisha said. It's a dance, not a wedding. I told myself that a dance was safe. I told myself that saying yes to a song wasn't saying yes to anything else. The music was loud and heavy, and his hand was warm at the small of my back while I tried not to think about how his chest felt through that thin shirt. We danced through one song, and then another. We talked in pieces, the way you do in a club, where you from, what you do, what you like. His voice was calm, his smile was slow. When he asked for my number, I gave it. That's how I crossed the second line. I went home after 2 in the morning and Malik was asleep on his side of the bed, one arm flung over his face, his mouth open. He'd left a note on the counter. Chocolate tea tomorrow? Pancakes? In the morning, he cooked pancakes, eggs, and bacon, and made me my favorite chocolate tea in a chipped mug he called the lucky one. He asked the usual questions. Did you have fun? Was Keisha there? Did Tasha get messy? I said yes, yes, yes. He kissed me on the lips and said he was heading to his brother's to help move some stuff out of the basement. He left, and 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Good morning. Are you up? It was Adrian. I stared at his name, feeling that sudden electric click in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. Not a better love, not a truer love, just a different kind of attention, like opening a window you didn't know was painted shut. I replied, Yes, I'm up. He asked if I had fun last night. I said yes. We texted the whole morning. It started light, jokes about the DJ, a meme about bad dancers, then slid into flirtations so softly that I barely noticed. He told me I looked beautiful in blue light and that my laugh was the only thing he remembered from the whole night. When he asked if we could meet up sometime, I said no at first. I said I didn't want to give the wrong idea. He said, It's just coffee. We can talk like grown people. He sent a smile that felt like a dare. The next day I told Malik I had an early shift and left the house. I didn't have a shift. I went downtown to a small cafe called Maple and Steam. Adrian was already there, sitting with his back to the brick wall, one foot propped on the rung of his chair. He stood when he saw me and gave me a hug that was close enough to count his heartbeats. We ordered coffee and a sandwich to split, and then talked like we had known each other as kids who had gone to different schools. He asked questions I hadn't been asked in a long time. What did art mean to me? What did I want a house to smell like on Sundays? What was my favorite thing about myself that I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to seem cocky? I said I liked the way I could make a room feel lighter by noticing people. He said he had noticed that about me already, and it felt like he had taken off his jacket and laid it over my shoulders. We stayed until I checked the time and realized I needed to go home and pretend I'd been at work. He hugged me again. Nothing happened besides words and a hug, but I went home with a bright, wrong feeling, like I had a secret that made the air taste different. I started seeing Adrian a lot. We met at the cafe. We walked through the park and counted dogs. He sent long messages at night, strings of thoughts about love and family and legacy, and the way he used the word we when he described the future hit me in the softest parts. We weren't doing anything, I told myself. It was just conversation. It was just attention. It was just warmth. Of course, that's how it always starts. One afternoon we met at his apartment because he said he had a silly movie to show me and he didn't want to watch it alone. It was a small place, clean, with gym shoes lined up like soldiers by the door. He made popcorn and poured it into a big bowl we shared on the couch. We watched an action comedy and laughed at the same parts. Then there was a kissing scene that was more tender than the rest of the movie, and the room felt different, like someone had gone around turning the lights down one by one. We looked at each other. He leaned in and I didn't lean away. The kiss was slow. It was the kind of kiss that steals the reason you were supposed to say no and changes the locks. We kissed until the movie kept playing without us, and then I crossed the line I had promised I would never cross. I told myself it would be one time. It wasn't. We started meeting every other day, sometimes every day if we could manage it. We told stories like we were building a private language. He said he wanted a house in the countryside with a yard big enough for kids to run wild. He said he could see me on a porch swing reading while he grilled and the radio played. He said I see myself with you with such certainty that a part of me relaxed. Like finally, someone saw the exact picture in my mind. At home, everything with Malik started to feel like a sweater I once loved and now itched. I picked fights over small things, the way he loaded the dishwasher, the way he hummed while he folded laundry, the way he tapped my shoulder to show me a video I didn't care about. I used our arguments as exits. I'm going for a walk, I said, and I left for hours. I told myself I needed air. What I needed was the thrill of my phone buzzing with Adrian's name. Malik noticed. Of course he did. He was paying attention always. One night he said, plain and quiet, "You're never home. You're always out." At first it was girls' night a few times a month. Now it's almost every night. He looked tired. "I miss us," he said. "I miss cooking together and burning the first pancake and eating the ugly ones as we go. I miss falling asleep during the movie and pretending I didn't." He swallowed. "Renee, I saw you the other day, on Grant Street. You were holding hands with someone. You kissed him at the corner, by the pawn shop. It broke me." His voice cracked on broke. "I wanted to be kind. I wanted to be honest. I wanted to be cruel. Somehow, I managed all three. I'm grown," I said. "I can do what I want. You can't control me." He asked how long it had been going on. I told him the truth. He asked if I loved him. I said yes, because in that moment I believed it, or I needed to believe it to justify the train wreck I had set in motion. I told him I was moving out to live with Adrian. He cried. I had never seen Malik cry like that, not with his whole face. He said, "You'll regret this one day." I said, "I won't. This is the best decision I've ever made." I heard myself say it. I didn't recognize my own voice. I packed fast. Not everything, just clothes, shoes, toiletries, a couple of framed photos I should have left behind. I put most of my things in storage and took 2 suitcases to Adrian's apartment. When I asked if I could move in, his voice went cautious for the first time. "That's fast," he said. "But okay, we can try it." He never said of course. He never said I've been waiting for you. He said we can try it, and I took that as yes and carried my life up his stairs. For the first 2 months it felt like I had made the right choice. It was all new morning light through different blinds, new route to a new bus stop, new set of shelves for my new favorite mugs. Adrian noticed everything, or so I thought. "You do that thing with your eyebrow when you're thinking," he'd say, and I'd lift it on purpose so we could laugh. He took me to a gym and showed me how to deadlift without hurting my back. He kissed my shoulder in the kitchen while I chopped onions. At night he talked about the future again. I believed him. I let the old life fade, because it was easier to drift than to look back at the person I'd hurt. By month 3, the edges started to lift. He came home late a few times. He answered my calls less. When I asked, he said he'd been with friends. When I pressed, he teased me for being clingy. I recognized the word. I swallowed it. One Saturday he said he was going to hang out with his boy Tone. I knew Tone was out of town for his cousin's funeral because Tone had posted a photo in a black suit with the caption, "Rest easy," and tagged a funeral home in another state. I didn't say anything. I waited 10 minutes after Adrian left, and then I followed him. I know how that sounds. I know it made me into someone I had once judged. I put on a hoodie and drove slow and careful, heart pumping in my ears. He drove to a hotel off the highway, one with a bright lobby and a fake plant by the window. A woman was sitting on the couch scrolling on her phone. When she saw Adrian, she stood up like she'd been activated. They hugged, and he kissed her like he kissed me. They checked in and rode the elevator. I waited and then walked down the hall to the room number I had watched them take. I stood outside. After 20 minutes, I could hear them. I heard his name coming out of the room as a strangled sound. I knocked. No one answered. I waited for an hour and a half on the hallway carpet, my back against the wall, and cried into my sleeve, like I could wring my mistakes out of the fabric. When they finally opened the door, I was still there, red-eyed and shaking. Adrian looked at me like I was a ghost from a story he'd told and forgotten. "What are you doing here?" he asked, as if the question were reasonable. The woman looked at him and then at me and asked, "Who is she?" He said, "Too fast. She's my cousin." The woman's face did something small and violent and then smoothed out. She pushed past me and left. I stood in the doorway and folded my arms across my chest to keep from falling apart. "Why would you betray me?" I asked. The words felt borrowed from a different life. We argued in the hotel hallway. He kept his voice low because he didn't want to be a scene. "You know what this was," he said. "I never told you we were a thing. I said I thought we were. I said I had moved out of my home. I said I had broken a man I loved." Adrian leaned against the doorframe like he was bored. "I'm not ready to tie anything," he said. "Plus, if we're being honest..." He paused, and the silence was worse than anything else. "You were a bet..." I laughed because sometimes the body grabs the wrong tool. "What bet?" I asked, like maybe he meant a drinking game or a joke gone too far. "I bet my friends $20 I could get your number and sleep with you," he said, looking me right in the face like there was nothing to be ashamed of. "And if you were in a relationship, I said I could get you to break it off to be with me." He said it like it was a talent on a resume, like he was proud. Something inside me went very quiet. I thought about Malik's hand steadying the umbrella over my head, about pancakes on Sunday, about the maple tree dropping seeds, about his voice saying "you'll regret this," and how I had promised I never would. I left the hotel. I went home to Adrian's place, home to a place that wasn't a home anymore, and I packed. I cried while I folded my jeans. I cried while I found my charger behind the couch. I cried until my eyes were hot and my nose hurt. When he came back 3 hours later and saw me with my bags near the door, we argued again. He said, "Don't be dramatic." I said, "I'm moving out." He said, "Where are you going to go?" I said, "My mom's." He shrugged. "Do what you want." I moved back to my mother's apartment with 2 suitcases and a plastic bin full of shame. My mom looked at me for a long time and then opened her arms. She hugged me like it was day one of the world and I was new again. When I told her what I'd done and what had been done to me, she shook her head slow. "You lost the best thing you had," she said. "It wasn't cruel, it was the truth." I tried to contact Malik. I texted, I called, I wrote a long email, I apologized. I took responsibility. I asked if we could talk, not to fix it, just to say the things that needed saying. My messages went unread. His silence was the most honest thing he could give me. From mutual friends, I heard the headlines of his life. He was in therapy. He was doing better. He had started seeing someone at work, a woman named Lauren, who wore bright lipstick and understood spreadsheets. After a few months, they were serious. Later, I heard he proposed to her at a botanical garden with a ring that's bigger than the one he gave me. Months after that, someone told me she was pregnant. I was happy for him and devastated for myself at the same time. Both feelings were true. As for Adrian, I heard things too. I heard he got a girl pregnant and then tried to disappear. I heard her brothers found him and beat him up outside a bar, bad enough to put him in a coma. I don't know which parts were true. I only know that hearing it didn't make me feel vindicated. It made me feel tired. The math didn't work. Nothing we do to hurt someone else ever seems to cancel out our own mistakes. I lost my job. That's a sentence that comes after a lot of smaller decisions, showing up late, calling in sick when I wasn't, staring at the screen while the cursor blinked like a metronome for my failure to focus. Depression is a fog that steals your edges. My boss, who was a patient woman until she wasn't, pulled me into a conference room and said, "This isn't working." I tried to argue. Then I stopped. She was right. So there I was, 27, living in my mother's second bedroom, unemployed, broke, and circling around the same 3 thoughts. What I did, what it meant, what I had thrown away. I missed Malik's safety and his steady money. That's the part people don't like you to say out loud. But it's part of the truth. Stability has a taste. I had been eating ramen noodles for months and calling it dinner. Now I was hungry for rice and beans and a hand on my back saying, "We're okay." If this were a movie, there would be a clean lesson and a neat bow. Real life scrapes along. Days were long and then they weren't. Nights were short and then they weren't. I gave myself jobs to do, wake up by 8, make the bed, apply to 3 positions, go for a walk, drink water, call Keisha back, stop stalking Malik's happiness like I could steal some of it with my eyes. My mom made lists with me at the kitchen table. She gave me bus fare without making a speech. Sometimes she made chocolate tea on Sundays because she knew that even smelling it could break me open. And I guess she believed in the power of letting a wound drain instead of sealing it up fast and wrong. I started writing things down. It wasn't a journal exactly. It was more like a confession that turned into a map. I wrote our names and our ages. Me, 27, Malik, 30, Adrian, 29. I wrote where we met, bus stop under an umbrella, club under blue light, hotel hallway where the door opened on the worst version of myself. I wrote why I fell in love with Malik. Kindness, consistency, laughter, pancakes, his belief that we could build something together that would last. I wrote why I fell for Adrian. Attention, the sharp click of being seen by someone new, the thrill of we when you're tired of hearing only us even though it's the same word in a different mouth. I wrote why Malik and I broke up, boredom I could have named and worked on, a need for air I could have asked for, pride, the lie I told myself that new equals better. I wrote what our day-to-day looked like. Morning alarms and shared showers on Tuesday because the water heater was better then, rice bowls on Friday, his sister's kids on Sunday, laundry folded into stacks we called yours, mine, ours. I wrote what my day-to-day with Adrian looked like too, gym selfies, coffee cups in a line, his keys on the counter at midnight while I pretended not to check the time. Putting it on paper didn't make it prettier, but it made it clearer. There were things I could claim. I could claim the choice. I could claim that I used Malik's care as an excuse to call him clingy instead of telling him I needed space in a way that didn't punish him. I could claim that I turned arguments into exits. I could claim that I loved being wanted so much I forgot to be worthy. Sometime in the middle of that fall, I saw Malik on the street. It was one of those coincidences that makes you check the sky for signs. I was coming out of the grocery store with a bag of apples and a loaf of bread. He was across the street with Lauren. He had a hand on her lower back, that same gentle hand he used to use to guide me through crowds. She was laughing. They looked good together. He didn't see me. I didn't call his name. I stood there and watched the light change, and then I walked home slow, carrying my groceries like a bouquet, for a funeral that had already happened. I started going to therapy at a community clinic with a woman named Dr. Patel who wore colorful scarves and asked honest questions. She asked me when I first felt invisible. She asked me what I thought love had to do to count. She asked me if I could sit with boredom without deciding boredom meant broken. I told her about Malik's texts, 5-6 a day, and how they felt like proof in the beginning and a leash in the end. She said, could both be true? She said, what would healthy space have looked like? She said, when you wanted to run, what was chasing you? It turns out I was chasing me. The part of me that wanted to be interesting and dangerous and new was running from the part of me that wanted a steady life in a small apartment with thrift store mugs. I didn't know how to be both women at once, so I blew up the whole room. We also talked about accountability because confession without change is just performance. I blocked Adrian's number and the ghost numbers he texted me from. I stopped asking mutual friends to update me on Malik because it was the kind of pain that never healed if you kept picking it. I applied for jobs and took the first one that said yes, even though it wasn't glamorous. Receptionist at a dentist's office, answering phones and telling people where to park. I told myself competence could be its own kind of thrill. I saved money. I cleaned my mom's kitchen like I lived there because I did. I tried to be generous. I tried to be quiet. 7 months after I moved back in with my mom, I got a call from a small design firm that needed a junior graphic designer to make flyers and social media posts for local businesses. It wasn't the dream job I'd described to Adrian in his living room while we pretended the world was ours. It was better because it was real. I said yes. I bought 2 thrift store blazers and shoes that didn't pinch. I set 3 alarms and made a lunch I would look forward to at 11 o'clock. When I got my first paycheck, I almost cried at the direct deposit screen. I took my mom out for pancakes. We didn't order chocolate tea. We didn't have to. I won't pretend that regret disappears. It becomes a room you live in with the windows open. Some mornings it smells like rain. Some mornings it smells like dust. I still dream about maple seeds sometimes. I still have to stop myself from telling the air about the house in the countryside with a grill and a porch swing. If I ever get that house, it will be because I built it with the right person at the right time, and not because I chased a fantasy into a hotel hallway. One night, late, I wrote a letter I didn't send. I wrote it to Malik. I told him everything again, but I told it differently. I told him I had mistaken noise for love and quiet for neglect. I told him I had wanted to be someone new, and used him as the old skin I peeled off and left on the floor. I told him that he deserved better than a woman who only learned to want space after she ran out of room. I told him I was happy he was happy. I told him that when I thought of him now, I pictured him holding a tiny, sleepy baby in a garden somewhere, and the picture didn't hurt as much as it used to. I folded the letter and put it in a shoebox with some other things I keep to remind myself who I was and who I don't want to be again. If you want a moral, I can give you this: love is not the same as attention. Attention is a sparkler. Bright, noisy, gone. Love is a pilot light, steady, small, warm. Attention can woo you in a club and whisper futures at midnight. Love checks in 5 times a day because it's thinking of you while it eats lunch at a desk that squeaks. I mistook the sparkler for a sunrise. I called the pilot light a cage. I set my life on fire to prove I was brave, and then I stood outside the hotel door and cried. Sometimes I still go to the club with my friends. We dance and we laugh, and I keep my phone in my bag and my eyes on the people who know my middle name. If a man comes over and asks for a dance, sometimes I say yes. We dance for 3 minutes. Then the song ends and I say thank you, and I go back to my girls. I don't need to be a bet. I don't need to be a story a man tells his friends with a dollar amount at the end. I don't need to be the girl who is easy to win and easier to lose. I wake up early most days now. I like the hour when the city isn't awake yet, and the light makes even ugly things look soft. I make breakfast for my mom and me when we're both home. Simple things, eggs on toast, fruit cut into a bowl. Sometimes on Sundays I make pancakes and burn the first one on purpose, then eat it standing at the stove the way Malik and I used to do, not because I'm trying to recreate what I lost, but because rituals can be both a goodbye and a thank you. I stir my tea and drink it plain, letting the cup warm my hands. If I ever fall in love again, and I think I will because I am not done being a person, I hope I will recognize the strength in quiet and the romance in routine. I hope I will not confuse constant messages with control or mistake space for indifference. I hope I will ask for what I need before I go looking for it in a wrong room. I hope I will be the kind of woman who can say, I'm bored, without letting boredom turn into chaos. I hope I will be the kind of woman who can hear, you'll regret this, and stop long enough to consider that maybe, just maybe, the person who loves me is not trying to trap me but to keep me from walking into traffic. When I think about Malik now, I send him a blessing in my head. May your mornings be slow and your coffee strong. May your baby sleep sometimes and laugh a lot. May your love be a porch light that stays on even when you're running late. I don't add myself to the picture. I don't have to be in his happy ending for it to be real. As for Adrian, I don't spend my time hoping for karma to keep score. I don't need him to suffer to believe I deserve better. I already paid enough for both of us the night I listened to him call me a bet. I folded that memory into the shoebox with the letter and the maple seed I picked up the day Malik proposed. Some things you keep because they're beautiful. Some things you keep because they hurt enough to teach you. I broke something that was good. I believed a lie because it was wrapped in compliments and possibility. I hurt a man who had never hurt me. I ruined my own house and then called the rubble freedom. I can tell you all of that because I am still here and I am still responsible for the shape of my days. If you are reading this because you feel the same itch I felt, hear me. There is nothing on the other side of that hotel door that you cannot live without. There is nothing on a stranger's couch that will teach you who you are better than the person who has held an umbrella over you in the rain. If I marry one day, it will be after long talks and short walks and a promise that we will both ask for space when we need it and give it like a gift, not like a punishment. It will be because the pilot light stayed lit, not because a sparkler made the room shout for 30 seconds. It will be because we are two ordinary people doing ordinary things well, which is how most beautiful lives are made. Until then, I get up, I go to work, I sit on the porch with my mom when the evening is warm enough, and I practice being the kind of woman who doesn't need a crowd to feel real. I am learning to forgive the girl who thought attention was love. I am learning to keep promises to myself the way I should have kept the ones I made to someone else. I am learning that regret can be a teacher if you let it sit on the front row. When Saturday comes and my girls text glitter tax, I sometimes say yes. I put on a dress and a little lip gloss. I dance. I let the music hold me for a while. When the night is over, I go home. I take off my shoes by the door. I wash my face. I set my alarm. I sleep in my own bed. I wake up and make tea. I am not a bet. I am a person who made a terrible choice and is still allowed to make better ones.